Thanks for joining us today on our edition of the Capital Brief. I'm Seth Berenzweig from Berenzweig Leonard here in Tysons Corner, Virginia, here with my colleague John Tamny, who is with Real Clear Markets and Forbes. How are you today?
I'm great. Good to be back.
Yeah, well, it's nice and warm in here, and contrary to the way it feels out in the icy tundra outside, although, certainly it's not Texas. We're here and, our thoughts are with our friends in Texas. Hopefully they can get things turned on as the good senator comes back from Cancun. I hope he had a good trip.
Yes, we're swimming above it all here, aren't we?
Absolutely. That one got cut short. I don't know why. Anyway, we're here today to talk about the U.S.-China relationship and where it's headed, and what more specifically some would call the U.S.-China tech war. As I was getting ready for this show, it really struck me how broad and how complex our relationship with China is, but also how important and how urgent it is for us to try to figure out a way to deal with China one way or the other. And there's just a lot of questions that I'd love to kick around with you. So just jumping right in, I noticed in reviewing the last few months of the Trump administration that Trump's policy as a practical matter to China was pretty clear, and it was pretty blunt. It was, tariffs and restrictions and going after Huawei and suing Tik-Tok and issuing executive orders. That was a very specific and discrete period of our relationship with China and in and out of the tech space. Now Biden has to try to digest where to go next. Do you think that President Trump's approach to China, and let's just focus on the last year of his administration, was a success? How so? Why or why not?
No, it was the opposite of success, because it was based on the presumption that trade is war, when in fact trade is about mutual exchange that improves both sides. Anytime we go after China, anytime we want to make China pay for something, we are harming our own economy. Let's not forget that, is the U.S. the biggest market for Chinese exports? No question. Yeah, we're the richest country in the world. But Apple's the most valuable company in the world, and it sells 1/5 of its iPhones in China. GM sells more cars in China than it does in North America. The second largest market for McDonald's is China. The second largest market for Nike is China.
Tesla just opened up a huge plant in China, and they're
unquestioned. Yeah. Big plant because there's a big demand there. Starbucks, there's 4,100 Starbucks in China. So anytime you do something that harms China, you are naturally harming the U.S. economy.
Now, President Trump, though, got a lot of credit for being tough on China. He said, and I know that sometimes he exaggerates a little bit, but he said that it was time to get tough and that he was taking kind of this pugilistic approach of, trying to bash them down and being more aggressive. He seems to have almost entered into a phase one agreement with China, but then things kind of backed off. A lot of people try to give and believe that Trump deserves credit for being tough on China. And now Biden is really letting it be known that he needs to have a couple of weeks to consider what's happening. He told the federal courts that he wanted to have a stay of the Tik-Tok litigation, where the prior administration was trying to put a freeze on their activity here in the United States. He's also made it clear that he wants to have a review of the situation with Huawei being on the list of restricted countries. And of course, Biden's reviewing that. But we're talking about the relationship between the two most powerful economies on earth. What should Biden do? What, if anything, should Biden change? Because he's looking at it, and he's going to be making some pretty heavy announcements in this specific space within the next couple of weeks.
Well, Biden should reverse both policies. The United States quite simply does not do these things. The complaint all along, and it was a nonsensical claim, is that the Chinese just steal intellectual property and they steal ideas.
Well, they do, don't they?
It's very much overstated, but let's look at TikTok. TikTok was an innovation that U.S. tech firms did not think of, and it was a very popular global innovation. Yet
100 million users in the United States.
So our response is to take it, to basically say you must sell it because somehow they're going to spy on an app that essentially younger people use
to dance
to dance
right.
to. Most famously, one of Victoria Beckham's sons said, "Will you dance with me on video so I can put it on TikTok so I can get followers?" That apparently was a national security threat to the U.S.
A little bit of a stretch, arguably, right?
A major stretch.
Yeah.
It was basically a protectionist response. Here's a company that's outdoing American technology, so let's force them to sell what they have to the U.S. Let's look at Huawei. Selling its wares in over 270 countries around the world, ahead of us on 5G. Wait, and so we're going to go after them? Think about this. Our economy is already weak based on the lockdowns. We need 5G as quickly as possible, assuming it's good. What do we care where it comes from? Mm-hmm. Yet here we are attacking a business that is so good that its products are everywhere, and so very dangerous the direction we're going, and it should be reversed.
Well, 5G, of course, is the future. And although the Trump administration touted 5G, they had some announcements and they had a big press conference in the White House about 5G. We're behind on 5G. Huawei is ahead on that. There are various pieces of the infrastructure here in the United States, including a number of places on the West Coast that have Huawei pieces of equipment in place, that if they can't continue to get serviced with new parts, there are people in rural aspects of the West Coast, for example, in Oregon, that could have a really big problem to be able to even get connection to 911 in case of a medical emergency. Put aside the role of 5G in the Internet of Things, self-driving vehicles, things that are going to be happening over the coming months. But the problem is that China is a powerful nation that often is behaving badly. They do engage in corporate espionage. We're not going to get into how they how they use technology to treat their own population, like the Uyghurs, and that's a whole other conversation, which raises a whole bunch of troubling issues. But China has demonstrated itself to, at times, be a bad and untrustworthy actor. So it's almost like trying to dance with a cobra. How do we balance the fact that we have one of the most powerful economic nations on earth that we'd love to do business with, but they can't be trusted?
Well, I disagree that they can't be trusted. I think that there's this notion that the U.S. should be the lone power. When in history has there been one power? Naturally, the Chinese are a proud people. Naturally, they've come back from massive economic devastation to becoming a still very poor country, but much better off than they once were. Of course, they want to exert their influence around the world in the way that we have for quite some time. I would argue that it's a good thing to have more than one power. As far as corporate espionage, there's an old saying in Silicon Valley that if you have a good idea, don't worry about patenting it because everyone will think it's an awful idea. If you can tell me what is good IP, let's take a train up to New York on Monday early in the morning because we will have a multi-billion-dollar investment fund by Monday afternoon. It's hard to know what's good intellectual property. Mm-hmm. Bill Gates is one of the richest men in the world. As he said, just about everything he ever tried failed. Jeff Bezos has spent billions and billions on bad ideas. Assuming the Chinese have stolen their way to prosperity, which I find is laughable, that would take pure genius to know what to steal. And then it'd also take even greater genius to mimic it. We insult our best people, our best companies by saying what our ideas are so simple that just anyone can recreate them. I find that insulting as an American.
Well, listen, I agree that there's at least some portion of this rhetoric that's based upon American economic protectionism. 5G is huge. We want to try to compete with Huawei. We want to be able to promote Silicon Valley, and certainly, although I think the national security debate on Huawei is a little bit more relevant than TikTok, I still don't understand how having millennials dance with their cats is a national security issue. I mean, maybe the cat's a spy. Who knows? It could be a very smart cat. And now apparently they're even engaging in court hearings, which is just amazing. Mm-hmm. But there's no question that part of this is really kind of speaking out of two sides of their mouth. And in fact, President Trump, in one of his interviews, when he was trying to support the national security argument as it relates to him going after TikTok and Huawei, also had no problem letting it slip out that he's angry at them because of the virus, and so we need to be strong. So that doesn't exactly send a strong, consistent message. But I do think that to a degree there has been corporate espionage. There have been a lot of concerns, especially within the technology defense community, and some people that I know in cleared positions in the technology defense community, that China does not play by the rules. It doesn't play fair. They are very smart and they are very creative, but part of their creation is stealing American intellectual property. To some degree, I think President Biden realizes that, listen, we probably as a country do a thing or two that isn't perfect either. But I think Biden he's walking a tightrope. On the one hand, he needs to talk tough. But on the other hand, isn't there a huge economic opportunity? Here's the dilemma. How do we achieve that balance with China? How do we create a policy where we can have mutual trust and be able to do great things together so that we can become business partners with China? It's great to say, and I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying, that the past is not only prologue, but it hasn't really, frankly, been very successful. So how do you accomplish that? How are we able to work with China in a way that we can trust them?
Well, I think we've got to stop presuming that the government has a role here. I know you're used to hearing me say that, but it's not. Countries don't trade, companies do, individuals do. And so this idea that this needs to be a planned concept, I think is dangerous on its own. But let's remember, we're already working very closely together. Again, any U.S. business worth its salt has enormous amounts of operations in China simply because it's a huge market. And so I don't think too much needs to be done. I think we've also got to stop worrying about if the Chinese have a successful company. If Huawei truly is the future of 5G, assuming 5G is the future, what do we care? It doesn't bother me that my shoes are from Italy. It doesn't bother me that my bananas are from Guatemala. Yeah. We are better off the more that other countries are specializing and doing great things for us, because if 5G is the future and they can get it to us the quickest, we get to evolve quickest economically. So remember, the Japanese were first to 3G and 4G. Did that hurt us? No, that made Apple the most valuable company in the world. The smartphone got its genius from an innovation somewhere else in the world, and so I don't see the difference here.
Well, listen, I'm all for free trade, but you can get a lot more invasive personal data and personal information from people based upon Internet of Things 5G technology than from eating a banana. Not trying to play light of it. Believe me, I have no problems with bananas. They're delicious. But eating a banana isn't going to involve a sharing of metadata. It's not going to involve one of the main concerns about China is that they have been absolutely brilliant at capturing personal identifying information, or what we sometimes call PII, of Americans, so that they create an online profile to know with people, where do they live, when do they wake up, when do they tell Alexa to play a certain thing, what are their political affiliations, so forth and so on. I'm with you on TikTok. I think that may be less of an issue, and I've heard Mike Pompeo argue otherwise. I don't think he's done a very good job arguing that as it relates to TikTok. But isn't there some kind of a cybersecurity or data protection risk when it comes to getting further into the weeds in terms of the technology and the technology information transfer?
Well, if there is, again, I don't see the government's role here. The reality is, if Huawei is the spy that so many American politicians want to claim that it is, that somehow China would be the first country in history that actually the state can launch brilliant businesses that meet the needs of people around the world, which is what they're presuming about Huawei. But if in fact that's true, Huawei is making an economic decision that's going to make it very difficult, with or without state influence, to do business here.
Yeah.
As Americans would probably prefer not to be spied on, But what we do know they want is, what is 5G? It's just a user experience. Americans would love to have a much faster user experience. They would love to have the businesses meeting their needs that they never imagined that would come from this much faster user experience. I don't care where my technology comes from. I just want my needs met. And I think this notion that the Chinese are somehow using it in a dangerous way is protectionism, and it ignores history. We saw this with Japan in the 1980s. Remember, Japan was the big threat then. Americans consistently throughout time create new boogeymen. China's the latest, yet we're doing it in very dangerous fashion. Think about Huawei. Quite literally, the daughter of the founder is stuck in Canada because if she comes to she would be arrested. Imagine if the Chinese arrested Jeff Bezos' daughter or Bill Gates' daughter. Imagine the American outcry. We are playing with fire here.
And I'm glad that you raised that, because that shows one of the many complex wrinkles of just how unbelievably contentious this relationship is. Just to develop it just a little bit more for our audience, and I think that you've hit on one of the more fascinating and just truly one of the stories of the weird, as I might call it. The founder and the CEO of Huawei, his eldest daughter works for Huawei as its CFO. She was detained in Vancouver, and she's being held there. I think she's been there for over a year against her will, and she's fighting extradition to the United States on criminal fraud charges. And, talk about being in an uncomfortable situation. Obviously, if Jeff Bezos' daughter was suddenly arrested, in China, then, obviously it's a very dramatic and very compelling situation. And the problem with the credibility of people who talk about it in Washington is that when somebody like, and I won't mention Mike Pompeo again anymore today after this, I promise, but I have a really hard time believing anything that he says, because on the one hand, he may be very right in terms of talking about her potential criminal culpability and technology issues with respect to TikTok, but that's one of the reasons why credibility is so important. And I think that Pompeo has a real credibility issue. But I can say from a legal standpoint, that resolution of that extradition issue is just completely up in the air, and it just continues to show where we're going nowhere fast on this relationship. Where do you see things headed? We know that Biden has made it clear that he wants to think about it. And of course, just because the government says something isn't the end all be all, because obviously corporations have a say too. But obviously the government is able to control through the list of restricted companies through the Commerce Department who are able to buy and sell and do business with. Do you think that there's going to be an opportunity for an opening? Because even if you just limit the conversation to 5G, the mutual opportunities for profit and technological progress are endless.
Yeah, no, I think that the relationship is actually, despite all this, going to get better and better. It cannot be stressed enough that when you land in an airplane in China, as an American, you feel more welcome than just about any Chinese person in that country. Everywhere you look is a McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Apple Store, Nike Store, Sunglass Hut. Everything is American there. The Chinese people are conducting a massive love affair with everything American.
Right.
And so the people love us. They want our goods and services. They want to be like us. They're working hard so they can live like us. And I don't think you can break that. It concerns me when the Americans are trying to criminalize a people that not too long ago, when I was growing up, when you didn't finish a meal, it was, hey, they're starving in China. So now they finally get to eat, and they want to eat McDonald's and KFC and all these great
and
things.
Drive Teslas.
Yeah, and have everything that is American. We are now saying, well, you're awful people. So I hope we can fix this. I think we can. How dangerous if we don't, and how self-defeating. It would be the equivalent of Gucci giving the middle finger to Beverly Hills and Manhattan. You wouldn't do that. We shouldn't be doing this to China. It's a huge and growing market for our businesses.
I think that we're really scratching the surface on how complex and how critical of an issue this is. And frankly, I don't think it gets enough attention in the press. You probably believe that referring to the phrase as there being a tech war between the United States and China might be a little bit overly blown. I think that there is a Cold War going on in tech between the U.S. and China right now. I think that, as you've correctly pointed out, a lot of it is just a lot of protectionist political rhetoric. I don't have a problem protecting American corporations, but I think that part of protecting the American economy and American corporations and workers is to flourish multilateral, multinational relationships. But we have a very contentious relationship there. We have some real data protection and cybersecurity issues there. I know that there are a number of things going on with defense issues in space that are really worrisome. But this is definitely an issue that's going to continue to stay hot, and we'll keep an eye on it. So as usual, John, thanks so much. Be well and stay warm.
Yes, will do.